the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, you'll co-chair alongside Mr. Kratsios. I think there's a history behind PCAST. There's been councils in prior administrations, but I think there's some value, David, if you could just explain what the council will do day to day, what its remit is.
Sure. Thank you, Ed. So PCAST is the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. It's a group that's been around since the presidency of George Herbert Walker Bush. I think that was around 1990. So it's been around for over 30 years. And the version of it that was created by Bush 41 was actually building on a group that was first established by FDR. So this Council of Advisors has been around for a long time. And the idea is to gather some of the best and brightest minds in the country on cutting-edge technologies to make recommendations to the President of the White House on issues that obviously can have a great impact on the American economy and our security and on innovation policy. And so we're pleased to announce this group. The President just named the first 15 people. We can have up to 24. And these are, I think, some of the biggest luminaries and stars in the world of science and technology. And this group will meet periodically to, again, make recommendations to the President of the White House.
Jensen Huang, Lisa Su, Mark Zuckerberg, Michael Dell, who I think also served on the PCAST 2001 under George W. Bush, and so has some experience of that. It's an initial list, as you say, but how was it composed? Why those 15 specifically? What is it that the President and you and Mr. Kratsios believe they bring in the first instance?
Well, first of all, I think there's a variety of technological expertise. You have people there who are in the world of software. Others are in the world of chips or advanced semiconductors. We have folks who have won Nobel Prizes for physics, who've done breakthroughs in quantum computing or fusion or small modular reactors. So there's actually a range of skills there. I'd say the other point that's noteworthy is that these people are builders, they're doers, they're people who have actually not just done research or academia, but they've actually built companies in a lot of cases around their inventions. And so I think there's a strong emphasis on what you might call applied experience here. I would say that of the different PCASTs that have been created, this one, I think you'd have to say, has the most star power of any group like this that's been created.
That I think, is the core question. What is the authority that this PCAST has? How did the discussions and actions of that council translate into actual policy? And if that were to be the case at all?
Well, I think that the way that PCAST usually works, it's a federal advisory committee, and we engage in studies and we gather evidence, then we make recommendations, and then those studies eventually can turn into policy. That's basically the purpose of it, is to provide the White House with high quality advice from some of the best minds in these areas of cutting edge science and technology. So again, we'll look at things like AI. Obviously, this is a huge issue right now, the impact it's going to have on our economy, on jobs, on national security. I think you can expect us to make some recommendations in those areas. We'll want to push forward the President's AI framework that was already released just last week. So you'll see, I think, a lot of activity around that, but it'll also be other areas as well. Like I said, advanced semiconductors, quantum computing, nuclear power. These will all be areas that you can expect PCAST to look at.
David, what does this mean for you day to day? Is PCAST now your sort of main focus in how you're serving the country and this administration?
Yes. I mean, I had in the first year of the Trump administration, I had a role as a SGE that had 130 days. We've now used up that time. And I think moving forward as co-chair of PCAST, I can now make recommendations on not just AI, but an expanded range of technology topics. So yes, this is how I'll be involved moving forward.
You mentioned some of the action that's already taken place from this administration in the context of AI. Does PCAST have a mandate to coordinate with different agencies and existing arms of government, or is it just advice to the President?
It's intended to be advice to the President and to the White House, to the executive office of the President. So yeah, we're going to again study issues, make recommendations, and that's the main goal of it, is advice. The president gets advice from so many different people. He already talks to a lot of these folks, including on this PCAST. But what this group allows us to do is study issues together as a group and then make official recommendations and issue studies and reports. And I think you'll see that's what you'll see coming out of this PCAST as it was in previous ones.
David, we've both just returned from DC and the Hill and Valley Forum, and I'm trying to draw a conclusion of everything that was discussed there. I think one thing that came up a lot was the need for just more codified policy around AI. You also were a co-host of the Winning the AI Race Summit, right? And the initial focus of the administration on cutting red tape, expediting permitting, a lot of infrastructure focus. What is the AI policy of this White House right now, and where do you see it going?
Well, Ed, you're right. The president gave a major speech last year in July, which basically spelled out the pillars of his AI policy. It was pro-innovation, pro-infrastructure, pro-energy, and pro-export. Since then, just like I said last week, we released a national AI framework, and the idea is to create one rule book for AI in the U.S. The problem that we're seeing right now is that you've got 50 different states regulating this in 50 different ways, and it's creating a patchwork of regulation that's difficult for our innovators to comply with. So what the president has called for is one rule book. What we did is, and I work with Michael Kratsios at OSTP and other folks at the White House, we looked at all the different things that the states were doing, and we tried to find some common denominators, and then we published that in a set of principles that we're calling the National AI Framework, and we're calling on Congress to act on that framework. The framework contains things like child safety. That's a very salient issue right now, is how do you protect kids online? And so we want to take care of that. There's things like the Ratepayer Protection Pledge, which the president's already announced. We want to make sure that these new AI data centers don't increase the cost of electricity for residential consumers. At the same time, we want to make it easier for those AI companies to bring their own power. So this is, I think, a much better approach than effectively the ban on new data centers that you're seeing from Bernie Sanders and others. There's principles and provisions related to content creators and how do you protect their new content while allowing for AI models to be trained. So there's a lot of different areas here that we've covered. And I think you're seeing a very good reception to this from Capitol Hill. Even the criticism, I thought, from Democrats was pretty muted. There's some Democrats who've already reached out to us. They want to work with us to see if we can do something in a bipartisan way. And so I think there's actually a very good chance that you'll see Congress now act on this framework, and we'll get some meaningful AI legislation, again, the one rule book that President Trump's talking about in the next few months.
Before November, David? A bipartisan AI framework before November?
I think it could happen in the next few months. I mean, again, we've gotten a very good reception from Capitol Hill. This is an area where I think we're willing and happy to work with Democrats, and I think there's a lot of Democrats who would like to see a single national framework as well. I think they understand that it's not feasible or practical to have 50 states running in 50 different directions, and I think if we can work something out, I think we could get to the one rule book that the president's talking about.
David, looking at the composition of the council, you and I have spoken in the past that the definition of a China hawk, for example, and the context of exporting technology, it needs some discussion. But on the chip side, the infrastructure side, those are a group of CEOs that want to sell their technology around the world. Do you see that changing the president's current thinking on exporting cutting edge or lead edge chips to China, or more generally in different jurisdictions around the world?
Well, I think this administration already has a pro-export mindset, because we understand that the way that American technology wins and dominates the globe is through market share. You want to have the most market share all over the world. You want the American tech stack to become the global standard. That's good for us economically. I think it's also good in terms of national security and spreading our influence. Now, whenever you're talking about countries of concern, China, potential adversaries, you have to be more careful and need a more nuanced policy. And I think the administration has supported that. But I think that in general, we want the world to be a place where American technology wins, as it did with the internet.
David, as we speak, the president is holding a cabinet meeting. Of course, Iran is the main focus right now. You described on the pod, it being the time to find an off-ramp. Would you just sort of define to your mind what that off-ramp would look like? And have you discussed that with the president? Clearly, the war in Iran has not impacted your decision to serve. You're proceeding with PCAST.
Right. Well, I'm not on the foreign policy team or the national security team. And so when I express a view on the podcast, I think people just need to understand that's a personal view of mine. But I don't think the view that I express is very different than anything the president has said. He has said that he would like to bring this war to a conclusion. He said that our objectives are almost complete. What happens next is obviously up to him. I don't want to get in the way of our foreign policy team making those decisions. So I think I should leave it at that.